Hello!
Hello.
Welcome back to the TYPO3 Online Days, iteration
Five.
5. It's 5.
It's
It's the
five.
5th time we do this. So, we hope you're all comfortable behind your seats, taking a look at the stream. We're very happy that you're here. As usual, the event wouldn't be possible with all the sponsors that helped out making all this work. The team behind the scenes, sending out the streaming packages, all those kind of things. So, big thank you to everyone involved. Our first speaker is going to be Tom Warwick.
Yeah. And
What
he's
he's talking
going to talk about TYPO3 website in 2021. So basically times change and how you build a website has changed over time too. So he's going to explain how we would recommend to build a site nowadays.
So best practices.
Yeah, a bit.
That's
and
good.
and stuff that we think is interesting.
That's totally doable. You know what else is super important? Doing the segue to our sponsor. So we'll be back in a minute after the short intermission. Don't leave.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining my talk today. My name is Tom Warwick, and I'm a member of the TYPO3 documentation team. Today's talk is all about building a TYPO3 website in 2021, and with the upcoming release of 11 LTS, we wanted to highlight some of the new features and extensions, and also discuss some best practices for setting up a new TYPO3 project for the first time. We have quite a mix of things to show you today, and we hope that some of the things we discuss will help you in your next project. So to start, we're going to take a look at some of the things you should do to further secure your installation of TYPO3 by setting up multi-factor authentication. And we'll look at how we can load our site packages and create responsive layouts using Bolt and the container extension from B13. And we'll look at how we can compile our front-end assets using TYPO3 Encore, and take a closer look at creating custom content elements and discuss some best practices around that. This talk isn't a step-by-step guide. However, we will provide links to all the resources we cover in the presentation afterwards. So just before we start, I just want to give you some information about the setup I'm using. I'm using DDEV to manage my development environment, and it's a composer-based installation of TYPO3 running PHP 8, and it is fast. So let's start by taking a look at how we can set up multi-factor authentication in TYPO3. One of the most common tasks when setting up a CMS for the first time is creating new back-end users. And multi-factor authentication should be used on every project, regardless of its size. If you're not familiar, MFA is a means of authentication that typically requires two pieces of information, a password and a one-time code being a very common example of this. So let's set up MFA for our installation. In this example, I want to ensure that both administrators and regular users use multi-factor authentication every time they log into the CMS. So I'm in the back end of TYPO3, and the very first thing I need to do is head over to the settings option in the admin tools module. And then we need to select configure installation-wide options. And then I'm going to search for MFA. So as you can see, we've got several options for multi-factor authentication on our site. We can either disable it completely, we can enable it just for users, non-admin users, only admins and system maintainers as well. In my example, I just want to enable it for admin users only, so I will select option 3 and write this configuration. And that's saved for us. So what will happen now is that whenever an admin user logs into the back end of the CMS, if they haven't set up multi-factor authentication already, they will be prompted to set that up and will need it to log into the CMS every time they use it going forward. With multi-factor authentication, it's really important that when we set up our back-end user records, that we add email addresses for each user we create. One of the newer features in TYPO3 is the ability for back-end users to reset their passwords automatically. So yeah, this feature won't work unless we have valid email addresses set up. And that's multi-factor authentication in TYPO3. Next, let's take a look at how we can load our projects, load our site packages, and create new projects. So before we can start building any TYPO3 website, the first thing we always need to do is create a brand new site package. To create the package I've used in this demo, I followed the site package tutorial on docs.typo3.org. It talks you through the entire process of creating the site package, along with relevant explanations for each part of the process as well. However, one of the common annoyances when creating the site package is the fact we have to manually load the site package every time into the CMS after we've created it. And that brings us on to our first extension, Bolt. Let's take a look. Bolt from B13 is a really useful extension that takes care of loading your site package's page TS config for you. All we need to do is set the name of our site package in our site's configuration file. So I'm going to head over to PHP Storm, and near the top left we can see our config YAML file for our test website. And then on line 17 we will see a new record or value being stored there. We've got site package and then T3OD21. So T3OD21 is the name of my site package for this presentation. And that's all I need to do for Bolt to call in everything or to load my site package for me. So what Bolt does is it looks in your extension directory and then automatically loads all your page TS config files for you. The only thing we need to do is make sure that we either have a setup or a constant TypoScript file in our site package so that Bolt can load everything for us. And that's Bolt pretty much, and I think it does a fantastic job of that for us. So next, let's take a look at how we can better manage our front-end assets using TYPO3 Encore. So my front-end setup is a fairly common setup for a web application. I'm using Tailwind in the front end, and I'm using Webpack to compile all of my front-end assets as well. So the next question people might ask is, well, how do I go about integrating these into my TYPO3 project and my site package as well? And that's where TYPO3 Encore comes into play. TYPO3 Encore allows us to generate our front-end assets and then load them straight into our fluid layout files. Let's take a little look. Once I've installed TYPO3 Encore, I need to add TYPO script configuration that specifies where my entry point and manifest files are located. Which will be we got it in the end. Okay, and there's my on-call file. So within my on-call file, I'm specifying two entry points, one for my JSON path, and the second one is for my manifest JSON path as well. And these are stored in my site package, like pretty much everything else in this project. So my entry points file is stored in resources, public, assets, and then entry points. And then for my manifest file, we're also storing them in the assets directory of our site pack. So that's where everything else is stored for that. All we need to do then really is call these two files in our TYPO3 or in our fluid layout file. And that's really straightforward as well. All I need to do is head to our resources folder in our site package, select private, layouts, and then our default layout file, which is here. And as you can see at the very top, we've got our TYPO3 on-call view helper, first of all, which we do need. And then underneath is our link tag and also our script tag, which will be injected by on-call for us as well. And that's pretty much it for TYPO3 on-call. It will then handle the compilation of all of our assets. Whenever we make a change, we'll run that, and it will then include them into our layouts file for every project we work on. So that is TYPO3 on-call. Next, I want to talk about Container and Content Defender. The container extension from B13 allows us to create multi-column layouts that are, more importantly, easy to create and really easy for back-end editors to use when it comes to adding content to pages. Let's take another look. So I'm in the TYPO3 backend again. I'm just going to give you an example of how container works in the wild. So I've got an empty page and there's no content on there at all right now. So I'm going to add a new content element, and you'll notice a new tab called Container. And we've got 3 different layouts set up at the moment. 1 column, 2 column, and 4 column as well. I'll let you into a little secret. I deleted 1 column about an hour ago, but it's still there. So I think I forgot to clear the cache, so that's on me. But yeah, we can add these content elements onto our page. And what's great about that is that I don't need to set up a page template every time. I can just use my default layout file and add these grid layouts onto the page straight away, which is a big bonus for editors especially. So let's take a look, or jump back into PHP Storm and see how we're doing that. I'll just close down Encore as well. So there's only 3 files I need to configure or touch to get Container working. So obviously I've installed the Container extension to begin with, and I've also installed Content Defender as well, so they're good to go. So the first place I need to pop to is TYPO scripts and then my grids directory, which contains all my configuration. And here we just set up our 2 layouts as content elements, and we use the B13 processor. And as you can see, we also specify the directory for our grid layouts, which we will take a look at shortly. Next, we need to go and take a look at the override, the TT content override file as well, which is here, and then there's TT content there. Okay. So within the TT content file, I create my instances of the container configuration class. I'll just hide that for a moment, and I'll show you both instances underneath. So I make an instance of the container registry class, and straight away I can give it a label. Obviously I need to give it a content type as well, and I can also give it a description. So in this example, we've got a 4-column layout. So I've got a column on the far left, which I'm going to call header, and then underneath we have one in the center left, another block of content on the center right, and finally we have another grid element on the far right as well. Now, You might notice as well underneath we have this C-type parameter as well, and that's Content Defender, which is coming into play. If I scroll back to the top of my file, you'll notice I've got a variable called allowed content elements. And then within here, I have a list of content element names, or TYPO3 content element names, which I've allowed. So if in the instance for the center left, center right, and far right, they will be checking, or whenever a user adds a content element, it'll be checking against my allowed content element options to see if they can be allowed or can be inserted onto the page. So that's our TT content file, and I've got two instances running at the moment. I've got a 4-column layout, and I also have a 2-column layout as well. So there we go. Finally, of course, we've got everything configured. We now need to do some magic in the front end as well. So we're just going to head back down to our site package and go to Resources, Resources Templates, and then the Grids directory. And there we can see our 2- and 4-column layouts here. And essentially, we've got 2 content elements shown for the 2-column layout. As you can see, I'm just using Tailwind, I think, for this project, and yep, that's all my HTML inside there as well. So that's really cool. And yeah, that's container with Content Defender as well. Next, we're going to take a look at content elements or custom content elements, something that scared me for quite a few years. In many projects, the default content elements found in TYPO3 are not enough, or quite often don't quite fit in with the overall theme or look of, or concept of a site in general. And for me at least, it's all too easy to create small blocks of HTML and then store them in the database. This isn't the best way of doing things really, and it can also have quite a big performance impact on your site. So it's recommended instead that you create custom content elements instead to handle these kind of tasks. In the example I've created today, I've created, in fact, a separate site package which is going to contain all of my custom content elements. By keeping our custom content element in a separate site package, it's useful to do this because we end up decoupling the content elements themselves, which means if we've got multiple people working on them or we want to use them in more other projects, for example, it's much easier to then port them around to other projects, like I said. So for today's example, I made a really, really simple custom content element that takes an image, or a background image in this case, then a little bit of funky JavaScript, and then we're taking a header, a text body value as well to make a little cool little block of content. So let's jump back into PHP Storm. And we'll close these down. So I didn't mention this earlier, but site packages in TYPO3 version 11 are a little bit easier to create, and we no longer require the local configuration file that we used to. And the other major change, so let me just close this down a second. I'll close down our demo site package. And I'm going to move down to our elements site, or elements extension, which is underneath. And there's not that much there, and that's a good thing, really. So let's jump into configuration first. And the first thing we'll notice, or what's new in version 11 is the icons class here, which makes it a lot easier to add icons for our custom content element, which will show up in the back end as well. So in this example, I'm using a rather basic SVG file, but yeah, this is so much easier to do now in version 11, which is cool. And then, yeah, next we need to take a look at our setup file. And this does, like most content elements, it does most of the handling for us. We create our custom content element, we give it a name, we attach the files processor to handle our background image, which we're going to upload later, and then we just register it, and that's pretty much it for our custom content element. So as I mentioned, we're also going to be inserting a header and some body text on there as well. So that's our setup.typoscript file. And of course, the last bit we need for any content element is some front-end rendering. So if I jump into the resources directory, private templates, there is our magic banner. And all we've got there is just a piece of a regular block of HTML with some fluid tags. I'm also calling in some external resources. That's another really handy thing about this way of building content elements, is that we kind of call in all of our dependencies within the template, which is great for pages that aren't using it. We can keep everything together and load it when we don't need it. And yeah, that's a really simple custom content element in TYPO3. Let's take a quick look in the back end as well to see how it behaves. So, you know what? We will use our container from earlier, and we'll create a 2-column layout, just to show you. And yeah, I've got a left side and I've got a right side. And then we will insert our new custom content element there as well. Now, straight away, I've realized I'm using Content Defender to limit what content elements I can add. And Thomas here forgot to add the new custom content element. So Content Defender is actually stopping me from adding my new custom content element, which is actually quite cool, I think. So I'll delete that for now, and I'll have to add that back in later. So I'll just add a regular content element for now, just to show you. And on the bottom left, we can see the magic banner, which we created just now. And yeah, it's a simple custom content element. I'm going to give it a title and some body text, and then we're going to attach a background image as well. And in this example, I'm going to attach a photo of the USS Excelsior. Seen as on a space theme, it is the most beautiful ship in Starfleet, and we're going to pop that in for good measure. And there we go. There's our custom content element running. And that's it really for my presentation. We're going to hold a Q&A session now. So if you've got any questions, be sure to get in touch with us, and we will literally start answering them right now. No questions so far. So someone's asked how many site packages can Bolt handle? And the great answer to that is that it can handle as many as you want. So you can continue to add additional entries underneath your first one, and you can load in as many as you want. So that's really handy. So if we look at our example, we had a site packages extension, or site package extension, and then we had our custom content element extension as well. So in our case, we were load in both and create 2 records and load in both. So yeah, to answer your question, there's no real limit, I don't think, to load in additional site packages in Bolt. So another question that's coming in is, why do we need TYPO3 Encore? And does it handle things differently to the asset collector that's built into TYPO3? So the main reason I say to use Encore is that, or TYPO3 Encore, sorry, is that by using this extension, we get to benefit from all the additional features that's in Symfony Encore, which includes chunking assets, which I believe the asset collector doesn't do. So yeah, just to answer the question again, by using TYPO3 Encore, we get to use all the features that come with Symfony Encore as well, which is really cool. Thank you for that question. Why should I use container instead of grid elements, for example? And to be honest, there's no reason why you should use one or the other. It depends really on which one you're comfortable with. Container is a fairly new extension, and I think it's great. Equally, it might be that you've got a number of back-end users who are already trained to use grid elements, and in that case, there's probably not much of a reason why you should switch over if your team are comfortable with using grid elements in the first place. So I would argue one is not better than the other. They're just slightly different. And I guess it depends on which one you're more comfortable using in the long term. And that was the last question. So again, thank you for watching my talk today. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any further questions, please just drop me a message on email or Twitter, and I'll do my very best to get back to you. And thanks for watching. Thank you.
the session. So let's see what's next.
Well, wow, wow. Next up is Georg Payreder of Salem, and he's going to show you how to expand on the digital asset management capabilities that TYPO3 already provides. Because, you know, sometimes you need a little more than TYPO3 can do on its own. And I'm really interested to see how his system performs with TYPO3 and what it can bring to the table to ease the life of editors. So Georg will take it away after this quick word from our sponsors.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my presentation today at the TYPO3 Online Days. Make content work with TYPO3 file abstraction layer and the DAM system. Yeah, so happy to be here today to introduce myself. My name is Georg Payreder. I'm working at Salem as in the tech sales team, and yeah, today I'm here to show you the power of integration between a DAM system and TYPO3 with a brand new connector we have in place called TYPO3 Connect FAL. So let's switch to my presentation I prepared for today. And as the title of today's session is describing, it's about make content work. It's about how you and users will get the best out of it and how you can work with content. And before we discuss and before I demonstrate you the integration between TYPO3 and our Salem Content Hub system, so the hands-on part, the practical part, I would like to discuss with you a few things which is important, like which content we are talking about. So what content and what is it? And first of all, yes, there are many content types. It can be a product animation, it can be videos, it can be relevant creation, warranty information, it can be landing pages, 3D viewers, and so on and so on. So you know and you see there is a lot of content out there, and it's super important that the content will be provided in a good way. and you organize your content. And that's why we have, for example, the DAM system, which I will show you. So the DAM system, which would organize the content, where you can add your metadata, where you can add your keywords, where you can add your structure there. And for the publishing to a CMS system, we will see today the TYPO3 and the connector in best practice and in life. Yeah, that's a lot of content types, so to say, and it's all about the product experience. So what I would like to discuss with you also today is why product experience or content experience is such important. And that's a very, so to say, bad example, if I'm allowed to say that. An example about a very bad experience about an website where you have a single image of your bike, in that case, where you have a very general description of your product, and where you have a very, how to say that, a very bad user experience. And what we would like to do, and what we try to do, is to get the best out of it and to provide a perfect product experience. And let me show you this experience, or this example here from our customer Scott, how it could look like. So they have a very professional product experience. They have videos on their website about the products, they have metadata, they have a lot of information there. So this would be an example about a very good user experience and product experience to showcase and to promote your content. And how to do that, we'll see later, where the DAM system will be in place and where TYPO3, for example, is in place. So, as mentioned, only the perfect product experience guarantees that your customers fully engage with you, your company, and your product, so to say. And a little statistics here. So 93% of consumers consider visual appearance to be the key deciding factor in purchasing a decision. And that's why why product experience is such important, and customers should focus on that. Another example here is that is how much faster our brains process images compared to words. So to provide the clients or the customers, the users, an image is much better than providing, of course, only text or text information. And so it's super important to provide images, to provide videos, to give the user a much better experience. Yeah, and for example, with the Celum system on the one end, marketing teams are able to create, manage, and route perfect content for perfect product experience. And what we're also talking about is that it's all about the content supply chain. So it's not only the organization, the managing, it's also about the whole process, the whole content lifecycle, from the creation to the managing, and also the orchestration of content. So the creation, for example, with other people, with the collaboration with photographers, with agencies, with colleagues, of course. Then, of course, the typical DAM part, like the managing of content with the metadata, to find the content, to find the assets, to have a very fast search, and last but not least, and what we also will concentrate then later today, the routing part with the TYPO3 connector to provide the content to other users, to people out there through a connector. And as mentioned, we will also focus today on the TYPO3 connector. Yeah, as mentioned, it's the whole content lifecycle. So the 3 pillars here: create, manage, and route. And there's also some additional information here, like It's all about the metadata, of course. It's all about the central storage. It's also about the AI tagging, for example, or AI features to reduce the manual effort. It's also about the first step, the teamwork, the tasking, the deadlines, and so on. So also the visual feedback maybe. So that's the whole process. And regarding the routing, so the publishing or orchestration of content in channels, and the channel is of course TYPO3. Content can also be provided in a CMS system, but also in other systems like social media. It can be routed to a PIM system if we're talking about product information, of course, and also in other channels like, for example, marketing or so on, or CRM systems. So you can see in this slide here that it's in for different use cases, in different steps, and these are maybe the 9 most important steps. So it's the content lifecycle, that you have all your content, if it's product content or marketing content, in one central place. So the single source of truth is the right terminology here. It's about find every file immediately without any time waste. It's also about provide the right content to the right application and user group and target group, and so on and so on. It's also about controlling the content, who can see what in your system, who is able or who is allowed to see the content. It's about sharing, it's about ad hoc marketing projects, and so on. So it's about different use cases, different options, what you can do with, as mentioned, of the one side with a DAM system, with our Celum Content Hub, and on the other hand, what we will see today, the TYPO3 system with the TYPO3 FAL connector. So let's move on to the overview of our integration here. So it's the new TYPO3 FAL connector, which supports the brand new TYPO3 11 version. And as it is stated here, some important things to mention. It's about publishing articles with current media objects. So it's very easy and simple for the TYPO3 people and user to define which content should be added from the Celum system. So again, the overall target is, and the overall aim is, content will be stored in Celum and will be approved and published to third-party systems. Yeah, the other advantage, of course, is that it's quick and easy to use the assets from the Celum cloud system in the TYPO3 CMS directory, what we'll see later in the hands-on part and in the practical part and demonstration. It's about also to define it in the predefined download formats, so in the format you will need in TYPO3, or you can also use, for example, a CDN, so a content delivery network, to have a very good performance, and also about a lot of access, for example, a lot of requests. Yeah, and last but not least, it's also about the cross-reference, the usage reference, what would mean that if an asset or a file will be used in TYPO3, you will also see that very fast and easy in your DAM system. So on one side, so to say, there will be a visual indicator, and you will also have a link and direct URL, which will indicate that the asset is used in TYPO3 and where it is used. All right. So let's move on. So as mentioned, so this was the introduction to the topic. It's all about to have the best of both worlds, so the DAM system and the TYPO3 as a CMS system with the native integration. And yeah, I would like to continue with to demonstrate and to show you the connector. So, and for that I will switch to my demonstration system here. So, just a second. All right. So, I will start here on my DAM side, on my Content Hub side, to show you, first of all, our Celum Content Hub system. So as mentioned, the whole content lifecycle, and in that case, we are in the Content Hub for the content management and organization. Yeah, here, as you will see, typical features here are a full text search. You can structure the content. So for all of you who are not that familiar with a DAM system, just a rough overview about what is possible there. So as mentioned, structuring is very important to structure the content for different user groups and use cases. Yeah, a central Google-like search to find the content. So that's the key principles which are important here. And of course, we also here have the asset result or the asset display here to show the assets for different use cases. And let me navigate to the structure we prepared for you today. And that's in the public area here. So just a refresh here to start directly. So what we have here, so you can use folder structure, but using folder structure is not mandatory. But one example is here to organize the content in folder structure. It can be also disabled here, but it's all about the content. So the content is the most important thing, and the assets are in the foreground. And what you will see here are some examples of assets which are approved for TYPO3, which can be used there, and examples about assets which are already used on TYPO3 sites. And I will also describe that to you a little bit more in detail now. So we have here one example. So just pick the first one here, going to the asset detail view. So a large preview to see the image in detail. And the other very important thing is to display the metadata. Displaying the metadata. So the most important information, with also possible for different languages, what you will see here. And here you will see that one was already published to TYPO3. And in most of the cases, an image will also have a description. And description about the content, about the most important information here. So what we did is we have here an structure, so the public structure, which can be used also in public. So it can be used on my linked TYPO3 system. And this public structure will be used exactly in the same case in TYPO3. So let me switch now to the TYPO3 system, where we'll see the integration now in live. Let's switch to the file list here, and here you can see we have here exactly the same structure in TYPO3, because that's an external repo which will display it. Very important to say here is there is no export job in the background, there is no exporting, importing or anything like that. It's just that the structures will be displayed and previews of the assets will also displayed here. Yeah, so you have here again to describe the integration in detail. On the left side, the external Celum repository. On the right side, you have the thumbnails here, the preview images with the title, so with the file name or asset title you defined in Celum. and of course also the metadata will be transferred or will be displayed. What would mean when I now would go here to the asset in detail to the file, you will see the Celum file name, and you will also see the description here, what we saw before. So not just only the file itself will be transferred, also configurable metadata will be transferred or displayed in TYPO3. All right. Yeah, of course, you have things like here, you know, like a search, so you can directly search in your structure here. You can navigate in your structure. You have here your central search field. You can also sort here. You can filter here. So you have different possibilities to find the asset you would like to use here. Also a lot of capabilities and features directly in TYPO3. All right. So if we would now pick one example here, so as you can see, a long list of assets here. Yeah, just pick, for example, this one here. There's the two, so the people here on the image, so in black and white. Let's move back here. This is the same one which you can see here. And this little TYPO3 icon or bullet will describe that it is already used in TYPO3 on a site. And by going to the detail view here and the external references here, you will see here in the external references two public URLs which would directly navigate you and link you to the page where it is used. So if a user would now click on it, he will switch to TYPO3, and you will now see in the image section here exactly where the image will be used. All right, so now let's do it a little bit more practical and choose a new asset which should be used in TYPO3. So the first of all, you can see the integration in the file list. On the other hand, you can also directly use it in the page overview. So just go here, for example, to a demo page here, and again we have here that super nice example about the black and white image with the kid and the mother here. And by editing this part here, again, going to the images section here, I can now see the image which will be used here. So it's also a preview from Celum. And I'm also possible here to edit this part here and to delete it, for example. So that's again here the description and so on we saw before. But I can also, for example, add a new one. And adding a new one here. So this was the adding a new image here, for example. And again, it's possible to select here. I can see the same structure like in the file list. And again, I can choose between different structures, and maybe I would now like to place here this new image, and again I have it here. So below the first one I can also manipulate it with the built-in TYPO3 image editor. So maybe I just need here a smaller part of the image. I can do that. I can crop it here. I can save the site here, and in the TYPO3 frontend I will now see here my screen with the used images. If we would now go back here to the new one which we just selected, so this was this girl here, we will now have again the overview about where is it used. And on the front end or on the site itself, so on the site in the what we saw in the backend in TYPO3, just the preview or the thumbnail will be displayed, but in the front end, you know, a thumbnail would be too less. So you need, of course, a higher resolution, which should be displayed there. And in that case, it will be the original format which will be used. So it can be, for example, the original file from Celum, but it can also, for example, be a CDN URL, so that the asset will not be pulled from Celum. So it's already maybe in a content delivery network, so prepared in a CDN, and your CDN will be used, or CDN URL will be then included and placed in on the site. All right, so switch back here to my page view here. And what I could now do is, for example, I have here 2 images. I could also again go into it and I could delete that image. So that's the first one, so the black and white one. So just delete the record. Yes, I want to delete it. I would like to use only the girl here. And if I would now save that and I would now go back again to my Celum system, you will see I only have just only 1 reference anymore. So before there were 2 references because it was used on 2 pages. Now just 1 is available because it's used anywhere else. So what you will see is it's a very up-to-date connection between the 2 systems. So if there is any change on one end, it will be immediately also shared on the other end. All right. So this was a rough overview about the most important features and things of the connector and the 2 systems and the 2 worlds, so to say. There are also more things planned in future on the roadmap, so this was just a rough overview. There are also a lot of more things which I could talk about. What are planned and what will follow are also dashboard functionality, notifications in TYPO3 and so on. So this is also a first step, and there will be also new releases in future to also extend the functionality of the connector. All right. So now we would come to the Q&A session. So let me switch back here and also let me see if there are also already some questions. So there was a question, is there an alternative text field in Celum for accessibility compliance? And yeah, the answer is yes, of course. There is usually, or there can be, an alternative text field exactly with that information. So for example, for accessibility compliance. So which fields are in Celum and which fields are in TYPO3 this is completely configurable. So the customer or the client decide which fields are necessary for him, if it's an alternative text field, if it's a completely other metadata field. So which information is needed in Celum and which information should be forwarded to TYPO3 is completely configurable and will be usually defined in the requirements phase. Yeah, all right. So there is also another question. Is there anything that needs to be considered regarding data privacy? That's a very general question where I would need more information, to be honest. But so data privacy is of course a topic for Celum. So Celum is GDPR compliant. What would mean data privacy is a topic which will be supported or which we are following. So like with cookie policy, with the right of deletion of user information, with terms of use and so on. And I'm also sure that data privacy is a topic in TYPO3 and also for the connector. So what is the advantage here is that the approval. So you decide, or the user can decide, which content is allowed to use in TYPO3, which content can be used there. It needs to be approved, and only the approved content where also all maybe data privacy requirements are met, this content will be then published or used in TYPO3. All right. So there are some more technical questions, but all the technical questions I would say are too technical. So my suggestion is that we're planning to provide a technical doc or documentation very soon with the most important information there, to also share this with you. So today is maybe not the right time to go into that detail here, and what we will for sure share with you very soon, as mentioned, is together with TYPO3 and also together with the implementation partner, we will provide a more technical insight into that question and into the integration to answer also these things here. Maybe the last one, because that's a very, not that technical. Where are the data center located? So talking about the Celum system, it's completely free where the data center can be. So you are not limited. So Celum is usually hosted on Microsoft Azure. So that's the hosting partner. The customer can decide where the hosting center or the data should be stored. And also, I'm sure also on TYPO3 side there are options, but talking about the Celum system, it's completely free where the data should be stored. All right, so that was the last question I'm able to answer. And it was a pleasure for me to talk today about the integration, so also about the power of Celum, the Content Hub, the power of TYPO3, and of course the power between the two systems with the connector and the integration, so the new file abstraction layer connector. As mentioned, it was a pleasure for me. Hope it was also interesting for you. And last slide from my side. If you have any questions, please contact hello@celum.com. We are happy to answer them. As mentioned, if you're more interested, please give us a hint, or please get in touch with us. We are happy to share that information with you. So thank you all and see you soon. Bye.
about digital assets in TYPO3 and how we can handle that. And now let's see how we can get our website to perform even better.
That's true. I mean, think about it. When was the last time a client of yours complained that the website was loading too fast? See? So Markus Amalaraj, sorry for butchering your last name, I promise I'll get it done better next time, is going to show us the basics and some advanced stuff in website performance, which is also crucial at any point. You know it, I know it, everybody should know it, but still it's good to have like some tips and tricks and some minor hacks. It's not, I don't guess it's hacks, but some tips and tricks to get it going. And Markus will take it away after this word from our sponsors.
Hello everybody, welcome to my session. My name is Markus and I work for Digitally, a digital agency from Hanover. Today we want to talk about website performance, how to build a very fast website with TYPO3. We will start with some questions, why performance is so important, how can you test or measure your website performance, what can you optimize, and I bring a small example, and then we summarize. So, first you have to understand how a browser renders a website. Imagine a puzzle, and every piece is a request to the server. So we have one piece for HTML, 5 pieces for fonts, 20 for images, and so on. And you know, you need a huge time for a big puzzle. So the main goal of website performance optimization is to simplify this puzzle. If you have an easy puzzle, you need less time. And if you do the puzzle twice, you will be even faster. First question is, why is performance optimization so important? Short answer, web performance is user experience. It is the first thing your user will recognize. Of course, there's even more, but all points related to a user experience. For example, Pinterest decreases his loading time by 40% and increases the traffic and the conversion by 15%. 64% of the users expect time under 3 seconds. Everybody hates slow pages. So, I hope everybody knows everything about Core Web Vitals. If not, text me. Performance is a ranking factor. Performance is also a factor for the Google Ads score. So it could be that you pay more for a slow website, for your ads. And if you have a fast website, Google can crawl your website more often. Next is, most of the time I can get all information in Chrome DevTools. I have the network tab, where I can get all the request information. The Lighthouse tab, it's like PageSpeed Insights, only running on my local machine. And the Performance tab, where I can get all the information about the rendering process. There are other tools like WebDev, Web Page Test, and GTmetrix. All give you similar information. You have to look, which do you like more? I prefer web.dev. It's really important to test your website with slow connection. Not everybody has a 200 Mbit Mbit DSL internet, but what's in a train? And you all know how terrible the internet is in a train is. So please test your website with a slow connection. You can do this with Chrome DevTools. That's not perfect, but it gives you a good feeling about what slow connection is. What can you optimize? Maybe you know the situation. The website goes online, and afterwards, the project manager comes to you and says, the website is too slow. Please make it faster. So you start to analyze and optimize something, but I think that's the wrong way. I think that's a big mistake, not having a plan or a concept on start. If everybody in the project team knows minimal criteria about performance optimization, they will keep an eye on it. For example, if you plan to have a big hero slider, the developer can think about it and how to make this hero slider fast. Maybe lazy load is the correct answer. And I bring you some other questions you have to answer. How fast should your website be? How fast is fast for your customer? Maybe you have an intranet where all the users come with cable internet, or you have a fancy landing page like Adidas have, and the user is so excited to wait 10 seconds to load. What is the expected load if you want to have 1 visitor or 1,000 visitors in an hour? That's a big difference. The hosting structure can handle the hosting structure the expected load. Do you have a caching strategy? Maybe you need to pre-warm your cache, or maybe you need a proxy cache like Varnish. And nice to know, you can calculate your performance budget. Go to performancebudget.io and enter the target time you want to load. For example, 3 seconds on a slow connection. And the answer is, your site should not be bigger than 300 kilobytes to load in 3 seconds with a slow connection. So 300 kilobytes is not that much. If your HTML file loads in 2 seconds, everything else will start loading after these 2 seconds. That means CSS and JS starts loading after these 2 seconds. That's really bad. So it's very important to serve HTML as fast as hell. Best way to do it in TYPO3 is to use static file cache. For example, TYPO3 without cache loads in 2 seconds, with TYPO3 cache in 400 milliseconds, and with static file cache in 50 milliseconds. And that's a huge improvement. On the right side, you can see 2 code snippets. It's identical. The right one is a minified and compressed, and it's half the size. That's a very small example. But look at jQuery FancyBox or Bootstrap. It's 60% smaller in the minified version. I recommend Xmin for that. Or Webpack in your build process. Hopefully all of you know what lazy loading is. Load images only when it's in viewport. So if you scroll, the images will appear. That will decrease the load on the server a lot. Your user have different devices with different sizes. So it's important to use different images for the specific device. The solution are responsive images. Here you can see a desktop image with 250 kilobytes, a tablet image with 90 kilobytes, and a mobile one with 70 kilobytes. You can do this with a picture tag and can define different breakpoints. The Bootstrap package, for example, can already do this. Here you can see 3 identical images. Same size, same quality, but big difference in file size. The JPEG original is nearly 1 megabyte, and the JPEG compressed has only 120 kilobytes, and the WebP version 60 kilobytes. That's really a huge improvement. And WebP, all modern browsers support WebP. So it's really recommended to use WebP images. For this, I recommend Image Optimizer for image-optimized images and WebP for WebP-generated images. So both together works very well. Usually, the client sends a request to the web server. But if you have a high-frequented website or international visitors, it's recommended to install a proxy or a CDN, proxy like Varnish, or a CDN like Cloudflare. This will decrease the load on the web server, and you need not so much web servers. What else? You should set correct caching headers. So the visitor, if he comes a second time, he gets cached content. Use compression like gzip. For example, an HTML file has 100 kilobytes, and with gzip, it's only about 10 kilobytes. It's highly recommended to use HTTP2. Main benefit is that HTTP2 can send multiple files parallel. HTTP1 cannot. Preload important files with meta tag or HTTP2 push. You can serve small images with base 64, for example, with a view helper, but I recommend only use images smaller than 10 kilobytes. And of course, you can pimp up your web hosting to handle the load. And in contrast to a normal web browser, a service worker can serve offline cache. So if you are in a train and you lost the connection, the browser cache will not answer. The service worker can serve the offline cache. And last but not least, every project needs individual analysis. So, I have an example. This is a fresh TYPO3 installation with introduction package. And I have to say the introduction package is not that bad. It's really fast. So I have to slow it down a little bit. And first of all, I start with a report in Chrome DevTools. So it took a few seconds. And as you can see, we've got 60 points. That's not so bad, but we can do it better. So if we scroll down a little bit, we see some advices. For example, the images could be better, enable text compression, reduce initial server response time, and so on. The next step is, what I do is look in the network tab, and what I see is we transfer 4.4 megabyte for this website, 43 requests. Then I look, okay, 18 requests for JavaScript, 3 for CSS, 16 images, and document. And you see the load of the document needs about a half a second, a little bit more. So we start to optimize these. So first thing is, for the test, I turned off the TYPO3 cache. So if I turn it on, as you can see, 400 milliseconds, 600 milliseconds to 50 milliseconds, 40, it's about 40 milliseconds. That's great. Next, I will install static file cache. So it's even more faster. I already did the Nginx configuration. Oops, hold on. This took a moment. So, and now hopefully about 25, 30 milliseconds every time. That's really, really great on my local machine. So that's enough for me. So I look for JavaScript, and I saw it's about 650 kilobytes only JavaScript. Very much small files and a big file. jQuery, Bootstrap. I directly see the jQuery file is not the min version, it's the minified version. So we will change this later. First we will compress and merge these files. TYPO3 can do this for us. So I turned configuration to on. As you can see, only 3 times files left. So now I want to install xmin. So, and hopefully, okay, so 600 kilobytes. And we saw before jQuery is not the minified version, so I include the minified version. In my example, the default, there is a minified version. I included the not minified one. So (600 kilobytes JavaScript), now be 288. So we merged the files, recompressed the files, and that's good. But next, I think 260 kilobytes is too much. We will now enable the gzip compression. I turned it off because my Nginx default is on, and we enable in this step the caching headers. So there's some caching headers for the expiry date. So save, reload the Nginx, and look at this. I will reload 90 kilobytes. So we saved about 200 kilobytes with this, only with gzip. As you can see, this file is gzipped, and it's 80 kilobytes, and originally it's 260 kilobytes. And that's really good. CSS is also good. Gzip do his work. So let's try to optimize the images. We have 16 images and 3.3 megabyte transferred. The biggest one is 600 kilobytes. So we will install Image Optimizer and WebP for that. Image Optimizer needs other libraries on the server. You have to install it, or your hoster has it already. So WebP. So we go to settings and enable Image Optimizer. It can optimize JPEG, PNG, GIF, and SVG. And you can see binaries exist. So we have to delete the processed files. So Image Optimizer and WebP will generate in this step new images. So hopefully it's under 3.3 megabyte. First time the TYPO3 generates the new images. As you can see, nothing happened. Hop. It's not installed. Have I deinstalled it? Maybe. So delete the processed files another time. And now should be load a little bit more. Yeah, as you can see, we saved up 300 kilobytes. You can see here's a WebP image, WebP, the JPEG version. There's a rule in the Nginx configuration or in the Apache configuration that redirect every JPEG to WebP if the WebP version exists and if the browser supports WebP. That's a very good solution, not having images, duplicate images in the search index, for example. So next step is to use responsive images, and the Bootstrap package can do this. I disabled it, so now I will enable it, and that's one of the biggest improvement I can say. So look at the 3 megabyte. TYPO3 generates now images for every breakpoint, and this took a few seconds. So, bam! 200 kilobytes. We saved mostly 3 megabyte of images. The biggest file now is 44 kilobytes. That's in a mobile version. So let's have a look at a picture. As you can see, TYPO3 generates a picture tag with different breakpoints. We have an image for desktop, for tablet, and for mobile. And if I load the mostly the desktop version, we have 400 kilobytes, and the desktop version 600 kilobytes. So that is really, really. So what is next? On startup, we want to change this. So we want to enable lazy load. There is a native lazy load in the Bootstrap package. So look what happened next. We have 16 requests for images, 300 kilobytes, and now we have 4 requests and 70 kilobytes transferred. That's really nice. So if I scroll down, the images load. So, and if we look all together, we have 16 requests, 278 kilobytes transferred. Before we have 4.4 megabyte, and now it's under the 300 kilobytes we calculated before. So let's do another report. And hopefully we will see, bam, 99 points. That's really, really nice. So we have some advisors left, but these are the last 5%. And this took you the most of the time. but 99% points for performance is really, really good. Everything about 80 is very good. So let's switch back to my presentation. Sometimes I get the question, when do I need to analyze or optimize? And my answer is, with every change on the website. And no, I don't mean content changes. I mean with every new feature or external script that was implemented. You have to check if the change will affect your performance. My advice is to track the performance with a tool like Analytics or PageSpeed Insights tool directly in TYPO3. So you can directly in TYPO3 see the PageSpeed Insights score. So nearly the end. Summarize, we can say a fast website is your foundation for a good SEO and your user experience. A slow website mostly have a bad conversion. And you see with simple things, simple doings, we increase the performance a lot. There's even more to optimize, but this will give you an idea of how to optimize and what you can do. And please understand that a slow website is a huge bug and not one task in your backlog over there. And the last one, performance optimization, is a continuous process. As I said before, I recommend to track your performance with Analytics or something else, PageSpeed Insights for TYPO3. So I hope you enjoyed my session, and now it's time for your questions. I will have a look in the chat. Is it possible to change to cache the output of my own plugin? Yes, of course. You can do this with the caching framework of TYPO3. This is very, very useful. For example, if you have a product search and your filter query loads very long, and you don't need to query this every time, you can cache this with the caching framework of TYPO3. You can cache objects or the whole output, the HTML output. Next question is about my image setup. It's easy to reproduce this, but if your editors are very good, they will uploaded optimized images. So I think the big problem is that the editor uploads very big images that are not optimized, and then you get can reproduce it easier. I can show you. Maybe I can show you the image template, so it's easier to understand how to do it. Nope. Render image. That's wrong. There it is. the HTML file generates the breakpoints, and you configure this with TypoScript. I hope this answers your question a little bit. Otherwise, text me, and I can show you my setup and how you can analyze yourself. The most problem are the images. I think one of the most improvement is to use responsive images, and the most sites I analyze don't use it. So the big problem is really not using responsive images. So, no questions left. If you have any further questions, text me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Slack, or what else. And I hope you enjoyed my session, and bye-bye.
That was fast. So thanks a lot for that session. Performance is something that's really close to my heart. So hope you all put this in practice. Do it. It's the right thing. It makes the web a better place. So what's up next?
Next is something that's very close to my heart.
Oh.
Yeah, because a community, you know, is more than just the software. It's also about the people and how we all work together. And Mathias Lesniak is going to talk about that a bit and make us all feel good with it, I guess.
And also clears up things, right? Because there's a lot of like we and they and you and me and
it's about us.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Every one of us.
Yeah, so looking really forward to that. Mathias will take it away after this quick word from our sponsors, and stay tuned.
Thank you all for joining today. I hope that you've really liked the previous presentations. Now it's time for something a little bit different maybe, but very much related to what you've already been seeing. But I have to say, this has relations to quite a lot more areas than what you might actually expect. But anyway, the topic for this presentation is open source and I. Freedom, love, and contribution. And of course, if the presentation is called Open Source and I, we have to talk a little bit about me first, of course. This is me, Mathias Lesniak, and I am a Norwegian. I am from outside of Oslo, Norway, a place called Nesodden. Very beautiful, of course. Some of you have probably been there. I am married to a Kiwi wife. She's from New Zealand, and we have 2 kids, and they've got so many nationalities, we don't know how to split it all up. I started with TYPO3 back in 2003, and I have to admit that I crashed my first TYPO3 installation. The second one went really well, and now, almost 20 years later, I'm a member of the TYPO3 Association board, so I mean, really coming from the bottom and all the way up. And then in addition, I also work, when I don't do TYPO3 stuff, I work at Pixelant, which is a Swedish agency, and I do the Norwegian office for that agency. But anyway, we are going to talk about open source and I. But really, if you talk about freedom and love and contribution, it's really much more about human community. The human community behind all of this stuff with open source. I think that during this presentation, if you have disagreements or anything like that, just think about this as a presentation that has a lot of simplified ideas about freedom, love, and contribution. I can't grasp it all, but if you have questions, use the hashtag, post them, and I'll try to answer them afterwards. But let's look at this open source thing. In order to find the answer to this freedom, love, and contribution side of it, and the me side, and maybe the you side, and us side, we have to answer one important question first. And that is really, what is open source? Open source, as you might know, is used by pretty much everyone. If you use the internet today, you're bound to somehow touch upon some kind of technology that is open source. But the strange thing about open source is that it's used by everyone, but very, very few people are actually aware of that they are using open source software. So to illustrate this, we can make a very nice Venn diagram here. These are all of the people who use open source every day. So that's everyone who uses the internet. So 1-2 billion people maybe more. And then the people who know what open source really is, that's like teeny, 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 weeny percentage of that amount of people. From that perspective, it can seem like open source is really a very, very lonely business. But open source is a really, really good group exercise. That's so important, but it's so easy to forget when you're sitting there and you're coding or you're doing what you're doing in relation to open source. In order to make sure that open source is that group exercise that it really is supposed to be, we have to talk about open source. And I'm going to say that a number of times during this presentation. And I'm maybe going to shout it. At least I think that we should shout about open source and what it really is, because that is important, and I'm going to show you why. But first, let's take a little look at TYPO3. You know, there is one area where TYPO3 is actually raising eyebrows. And you might not know it, and you might not be aware, but TYPO3 is shouting open source in a place where other people are not doing it. Now, I can hear you're thinking really fast here, but let's take a look where it is. And it is actually in the source code of TYPO3.org. And let's take a little look at this source code. You can see it there. The source code of TYPO3.org has a comment about TYPO3 being free open source content management framework. And I don't know if you realize, but that is really, really, really big. It is really surprising to some people who come to TYPO3 for the first time. Because this is not the normal way of talking about open source. And you know what? This is actually a required part of every single TYPO3 website. Every single TYPO3 website has a comment similar to this one, informing about what TYPO3 is and shouting out about open source. So, to compare this, just have a little look here at, for example, WordPress.org. Is there any mention of open source there? No. These are the first 15 lines. The first 15 lines from Drupal.org, for example. There is no mention of open source there either. So that is one of the places where TYPO3 is talking about open source. And of course, I am not saying that other open source systems are not talking about open source. But generally, across the board, we all have something to learn from each other about how we talk about open source. And I would really encourage everyone to speak up about open source. There are different traditions, but we need to talk about open source. Because
what happens when open source happens? Well, we have to be clear about what this is, but open source is really a new paradigm. Open source is something that you're not taught in school. Most people don't really know what it is, and maybe you don't even know what it is. To compare, let's see what happens in the normal, traditional economy, you know, what happens in the economy that you learn about when you're in school. So, we actually participate in that economy normally as well, but open source adds to it. So if you're in an agency, your agency probably gets clients, and those clients, they go about and they say, well, we're a business and we need a new website. Let's contact a web agency. And they go and they call your web agency and they say, hi, we've got lots of money. Do you have a website for us? And then you answer back, well, I've got lots of website and I need a lot of money. So there you just exchange one thing for the other. You get money and the client gets happy and a website. That is very, very simple, and it's how we've sort of been dealing with trade forever. It's like this apple and this orange. If I have an apple and you have an orange, well, I might not like apples. So I might want that orange more than you do. And then we swap. So instead of this simple swap, we just have money in between, and that's the simple traditional economy that you learn about in school. Open source, of course, is different, totally different. Open source doesn't use money in the same way, and open source has something much more valuable. Buying a product is a passive thing. Well, open source is about collaboration and about trust. And the special thing with open source that you don't find when you just have a normal money transaction is that it allows you to actively participate and take charge in the whole process of creating. But in the end, open source software is giving away. TYPO3 is released under the GPL license, which means that you have to sort of give it away. If you give it to one person, you have to give it to anybody else who asks for it. And also, through that, you also have to give away without expecting anything in return. And that can be quite frightening for some people who are new to this. You know, and strange. I mean, one of the things that really keeps business going, we think, is that we keep the magic sauce to ourselves. By keeping that secret, we have sort of we're a step in front of everybody else, and then we will win. But open source is really about showing people their magic sauce. Like we do in Pixelant, where I work, we have T3Kit, the website package for agencies, and that one contains all of our magic sauce. There's no other secrets. It's all about trying to make it better together. And that's what happens when we give out our magic sauce. Somebody else can add spices to it, and we actually get something back from it. But when you give away open source, you're ultimately giving away something much, 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 much better than just spice. You're giving away freedom. And freedom, well, that's also why we very often differentiate between just talking about open source and talking about this free and open source software. TYPO3 is free and open source software, because not all software that has an open source code is necessarily free. You can't change it or stuff like that. Well, there is still money in open source. Free does not mean no cost, but it means that you don't buy one license for one product. You might actually have to pay to download a piece of software that is free and open source, but you don't pay for the actual product. Now, The product can always, if you download it, be given away to others. And that means payment is not a required part of the transaction. That also means that there is no building up of debt. You don't owe anybody anything for using and distributing the software. And hey, that's actually similar to something else. Wonder what that could be. Well, imagine that you have a friend. I really hope you do have a friend, because friends are really, really great. And one of the great things about friends is, well, let's say that this friend has a pickup and you don't have a car. You have a lot of wood that you need to get driven from point A to point B. Well, you can ask your friend, hey, can you help me? Can you come with your pickup and help me drive this wood from point A to point B? And the friend will say, yes, sure, absolutely. And you might say, well, I pay the petrol. Hey, that's like downloading, right? You pay for downloading, I pay for the petrol. You're helping it happen. But you would never think about paying your friend per hour for that kind of service. You would not. And your friend, if he or she is a real friend, would expect nothing in return, which means that it's actually an act of love. And I don't mean the kissing kind of love here. This is the friendship act of love, the selfless love, the giving away. And that's giving away. That's what we do in open source as well. We are giving away a gift to the world. The gift of ultimate freedom, the perfect gift, the freedom of making your own choices entirely. And when you talk about this and freedom and wow, and it's so nice to give everything away and not expect anything back, you often hit upon people who come with the question of, what about the morale here? Shouldn't you really give something back? Well, no. When you moralize about open source or anything else that is about these selfless gifts, you're very close to asking for something back, and then it stops being this free transaction. You remove the freedom, and we don't want to do that. So, if open source is an act of giving, then there is also no accounting in that. You don't count favors. You just give away, and maybe you expect that something happens in return, but it's not a part of the actual transaction. But how does open source really survive if that's the way we're doing it? How can this system survive? The person who gives something away gets nothing. Well, the answer is really, really simple. Open source is magic. Yep, that's the simple explanation. Open source is magical. Because what happens when an open source project comes online? If you publish it on GitHub or somewhere else, well, magic happens. This dead code that you've only been working and putting things into, well, it comes alive. And I'm not talking about zombies here, and I'm not talking about Frankenstein's monster and anything scary. I'm more talking about something similar to Pinocchio or the gingerbread boy. These fairy tales that we find quite a lot of in different cultures where parents wish that they had a child, but they can't get it for some reason, and they try to create some kind of replacement. It might be a gingerbread boy, it might be a wooden puppet, but anyway, what happens is it comes alive, and it doesn't just come alive, but it has a life of its own and a mind of its own. That's what happens with software as well when you publish it. You get contributors and opinions and people with their own thoughts. You give up something, but you also gain so much more. So having software with a life of its own is a good thing, because everyone who's involved are really striving towards the same good, to make the software better. So yes, this is all an act of love. We no longer have a vendor that's just supplying us a product. That also means that everyone can make their own version of the product, but strangely, that doesn't happen. There are very few forks in open source projects. And when they happen, people cry and it's really terrible and all of those things, because open source really only works when people collaborate. If it was one different copy of the software for everyone who downloaded it, it wouldn't really have worked as a collaborative project. In TYPO3, we're of course open source, and that's different from just selling a product. It means that we introduce other things into the process of creating the software that you don't find in open source, in normal closed source projects. For example, we have democracy. We have a pretty flat decision-making structure. We are less authoritarian. And that's actually important, because normal software just gives you a version and tells you, well, this is what you get. With open source, you can participate in creating the software that is best for you. There is more pluralism. And all of this is, in fact, a lesson in applied democracy, about making free choices in collaboration with other people. And that's one of the really cool things about having an open source community like the TYPO3 community. When TYPO3 goes out and does something for somebody else, well, let's say that the TYPO3 expansion committee goes out to the government of Rwanda and gives away some TYPO3 expertise, helps them build their new websites. What happens is not that we just give away TYPO3 and ask for them to pay license money back. We're actually building local open source communities. It's, in a way, foreign aid the open source way. And it's important to think about this, because with closed source software, it's a lot of the way that you can think about aid in a colonial way, where you just go in so that you can take something back. So I can have my closed source software and I give it to someone so that they can pay me licenses, or I get something back from it. That is not how it happens when TYPO3 and open source goes in and helps some country develop their websites. What happens is that we actually want to develop a totally independent and free local business that can support the local economy. So we're not just grabbing money, we're actually just pushing the knowledge and the software in there, because we know that that will build something magical will happen, and we will get something more that will happen here. And maybe in the end, some of the products, some of the code that is written by these people who are working in this new community will in the end maybe benefit the whole community. That's the point of the community. Our work benefits everyone. What also happens here is that because this is an open and democratic community that we're building civil society, just like a choir, for example, where people participate for their own good, for their own joy, and also for the common good of the people in their country. That's an important part of democracy, participation. But still, you know, there is one thing that we need to talk about, and yes, if you think about open source again, if you just give it away, you will still have a lot of uninformed people living a life in blissful ignorance because they can use the software and they don't have to think about money and they don't have to think about anything. Well, that might seem strange and it might seem bad, but it's actually really, really, really good. There is absolutely nothing wrong about having users living in blissful ignorance as long as you manage to build your open source community. You cannot build an open source community on everyone being ignorant. You have to build a community as well as democracy on learning and knowledge, not on ignorance. Which is why, again, we have to talk about open source. We have to talk about what it means. That it means democracy, that it means participation, the possibility to participate. And it also means telling the other people in the community what you mean, what you think, what you want with the software. It means free speech. Another pillar of democracy. Because yes, what happens when open source happens? You get open information, you get open conversations, and you get freedom. Those are all keys not only to software, but also to build a prospering community, to build a prospering country. So you could say in a way that a better world happens when open source happens. Fantastic. One last thing though about freedom. Freedom is one of these power tools. You have to wield it responsibly. Just like democracy, by the way. And when we talk about freedom, it's very easy to talk about stuff like rights. I have the right to freedom. But it's difficult at the same time to talk about the responsibilities that come with that freedom. You know, open source works because we make it work. We're not only informed about open source, but when we want to, collaborate to make the best decisions for everyone in the software. If I was an agency working towards a specific market, of course I would like to have my wishes in the software. But still, I have to be aware that there might be others there who have other wishes and allow them to be part of the project as well. The best software for everyone. So you have to see your role in shaping the software, the open source software project when you're participating in it. There are so many ways to give back, and people should feel that openness to be able to give back in whatever way they can. Of course, nobody can tell you what's right for you. You have to decide that based on the freedom that you have and the information that you have. And it might be impossible for you to contribute right now, and that is totally acceptable. But some people will want to participate. And that is why we have to talk about open source. It is our responsibility as a community to make sure that everybody knows how open source software works, how free and open source software works. And we have to build this trust, we have to build this freedom, and we have to build a knowledge of the responsibility that comes with it. So yes, there are few people who know about open source and what it is, but hopefully there will be more. So we could call this a fringe concept, but a fringe concept with a great potential to guide the development of fair and free and democratic society, as well as an excellent CMS and the CMS community. So, open source and I, open source and them, and of course in the community, open source and us, with freedom, love, and contribution. And so, that's the end of my presentation. And I am going to open up for some questions. Let's see here, what's coming in here. So, I think that one of the things that you might think about when you deal with an open source software, that is this weighing up of, can I actually give something back? Am I actually able to do this? And it can be a pressure, this thing, to always want to give back but maybe not be able to do it. And I want to stress how important it is that you, as a participant in an open source community, contribute as much as you feel is possible. And it should be possible as well to say that, well, you know, I have so much else in my life that I can't right now. But that decision is your free decision, and that's the important part, just as it should be with democracy in a country. So, one question that has come in is, if I wanted to contribute to TYPO3 today, what would you say, where should I start? That depends a lot on your personal knowledge and your strengths. If you're a developer, one of the things that actually is a really good way of learning TYPO3 is to start looking at the code and start using TYPO3. If you find something in TYPO3 that you find is difficult or that you find is not well described, well, you can contribute to the documentation, for example. As your knowledge grows, you can be able to contribute to the code as well, but thinking that you should contribute to the code first is often a very difficult step. So looking for other places, other teams to participate in first might be a very good starting point. Now, we are closing in on the end here, and I'm very thankful for you listening in. Go out there, talk about open source. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Matthias Schreiber, CEO of TYPO3.
And I'm Susie Moog, and welcome to the Online Days.
What the f***? That was good things to learn, pretty much. I took a lot away from that. What about you?
Me too. I feel part of the community, I feel motivated, and I'm looking forward for the next iteration.
Of what?
Of TYPO3.
Wow. So, first off, again, thank you all for watching. Thanks a lot to all the sponsors who made all this possible. And just next week on Tuesday, we're going to have the release party for TYPO3 version 11, which will take us to the next level with, what was it, warp speed?
Warp speed.
Warp speed. So, I'm going to get back to the space station. You're going to get beamed up?
Beam me up.
And we'll beam you up. See you later.